So we are now going to explore something totally different, the digital mobility transition. And here I have on my left, I have Christel Plessers, who is head of IT European Markets, Mercedes-Benz Daimler. And she was formerly Chief Information Officer for the Belgian-Luxembourg branch and has had held a range of IT-related positions at Interbrew, actually. But what I should clarify is that you are really heading up digital internally.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So that's where your area of expertise is going to be on this panel.
Yes,
just to be clear, if there are questions for this lady. Next, we have also from the European Commission DG Move, the Director for Investment, Innovative and Sustainable Transport, Herald Ruijters. So you are a great person to have. Why am I saying you're a great person to have here? And you studied, is this right? Sorry, I love saying this. I love saying this because you're not an engineer or a mechanical. You're French literature, EU studies and law. Huh? An Arab? You didn't cram that in your CV. You thought you'd be showing off. His CV is ridiculous. I got depressed reading his CV. Okay, not that you're not all brilliant, I have to say. Olle Isaksson, who is Principal Strategic Customer Engagements at Ericsson. So this is a guy who knows all about marketing, good management, sales, supply chain, and particularly he focuses on ICT solutions for companies. So you are well qualified to be on this panel. Stéphanie Leonard, who I've had the privilege of having on a panel before, Strategic Business Development Manager at TomTom. You studied history and politics. I don't know why I love saying this, but it's quite nice to see where people started out. And Stéphanie maps technologies and innovations for a safer, cleaner world. I like that. When you go to a dinner party and people don't know you, is that what you say? What do you do? I map. I like that idea. It's great. And then the man at the end is fluent in 25 languages. Joost Vantomme, he is the Smart Mobility Director at ACEA. So he's an expert in legal and regulatory and public affairs, and you sit on the board of Vertico and also Mobility as a Service Alliance. So that gives you a little bit of an idea why these good people are here. Again, we have about 50 minutes to explore challenges and opportunities of the digital mobility transition. Again, we're going to look at things like we did in the first panel, scope, speed, timing, milestones. We also want to look at the hype versus the reality. That's very, very critical. And of course, what's the consumer's role in all this? What's the consumer's habits, the consumer's needs, the demands? How does that influence things? It'd be nice to ask what perhaps the auto industry can learn from the telecoms industry, because you've got this hardware to software transition. What should we be learning? And of course, who the new players are that the auto industry needs to be cozying up with. So I will take the same format as I did the first time, if I may. So I'm going to ask you an opening question for a punchy response. And I'll start with you, Christel. What is the key challenge on the road to connectivity and automation? You heard lots of the key challenges on the front end for the energy transition, or you can grab that. What is the particular challenges for connectivity and automation?
Indeed. Key challenges are there, more than one. We have the connectivity, automation at one hand side, but at the other hand side, it's really also about sharing an electric powertrain, as we heard before. For us, it's really clear that all these four topics can turn the world upside down by themselves. For us, as Daimler, it is a key thing that we do the dovetailing of them for. We want to be the provider for the customers of a really fluid mobility solution by dovetailing those four topics all together.
Okay. And where do you see, what's your sort of challenges? Are there particular, you dovetail and that's what you provide. Is there anything where you think, this is where we have the most discussions around, this is where we need to have
I will leave the electric part for the colleagues who talked
Okay,
before.
no, that's okay.
I'm more familiar with, for instance, the things we do about autonomous driving. So there we have a nice example of where we pilot for the moment in our Mercedes-Benz museum in Stuttgart, the whole automated and autonomous valet parking.
Right.
So in the parking lot of the museum, we have implemented the full collaboration with the infrastructure, so to make the parking completely autonomous. So that's how you see the evolutionary part of the whole digital part of what we're intending to do. So.
And we heard, I mean, again, if this is something for you, we heard earlier, was it the gentleman from McKinsey was talking about, people will switch, they're quite brand-centric, but they'll switch for connectivity. I mean, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, so when you talk about mobility, you mean, so customers, we want to provide a connected mobility, yeah? So not only just your car producers, and we are the best ones, then it's also the mobility element that we want to stress on and really develop for the future. Therefore, also we have now a very recent, 2 months ago, it was announced, a partnership with BMW, where we really want to provide much more better mobility by combining these things. And we have established 5 joint ventures where we really have 5 offerings on the whole multimodal mobility connection, the whole, that's reach out it's called, and you have the charge thing, discussed also before, you have the park now option, the ride option, so the taxi offering. So all these things are coming out to the customers. It's more than 60 million customers that we will reach with this, just by combining these mobility things to the end consumers.
Okay, thank you. And I will come back to you about this consumer relationship, because we did touch on that in the first panel, and it's a very important issue. So for you, the Commission, what's the key challenge? Where are we? What really grates for you?
Thank you, Katarina. I will just also use 1 minute to come back also to the previous panel, because this is about the mobility transformation. Yeah. And I think what has been said here before, the previous panel on let's say, decarbonization via e-charging and these 1 million charging points, I fully agree with Arthur that one of the key issues that we should take out of the air is this range anxiety. And we are working very closely together with the different services in order to do that very quickly. Because if I heard the car industry here, and I'm very happy about this signature, that this is a key issue, and I think it is, despite what Max said, I think it really is, then we should do this as quickly as possible with all the key stakeholders. And on the declaration, I really miss the member states. I mean, in the end, we will dependent also, as Arthur, as you said, about a good MFF and the money that needs to be in there in order to make this happening. Mm-hmm. It's not only public money, it will not only be us, it will be many, many more. There's also the EIB, it's blending of money with private, and in some areas we even criticized that we are still pouring in money in form of grants to set up these 1 million charging points, because we would also distort the market. So we have to be a bit careful there. We have to really look, where are we going to put those points? Where are they missing? And how are we going to do that? I mean, we did already for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then there were no vehicles. I'm sorry. I mean, where was the car industry at some point? We had really to wait a very long time. And I don't want to criticize there. I mean, we really need to do that jointly. That was very well said also by Julia from TNE. Okay. So I think this is a very good day. I really like this signature, and I'm grateful for the signature, because we really need to do that. And the new president-elect will call upon that very, very strongly in the beginning. Now, to quickly go to digital, because of course this is the panel about digitalization. I think what is expected there also from the car industry and from all of us in the room is the same. There needs to be a long-term stability. And what is expected is that there will be a framework in which all the different services in the Commission work together, but also with all the stakeholders. So if we talk about automation, we cannot now, after the CITS not maturing enough to give a delegated act at the end of last year, beginning of this year, we still need to provide that framework, and we're going to do so. We're going to continue our investments in C-Roads and CITS and provide that framework because we need this single trust domain. And we also need to have continuity of the 350 million we have so far invested, and with 17 member states being there, to make sure that the car industry can also trust that there will be, in the end, this area. In the beginning, it will be limited. It will be in reserved areas, like for instance, in airports or other, let's say, closed-off spaces. But bit by bit, there will be automation that comes through. And for that, we need to work on those standards. And I think there will be a lot said also by my neighbor on 5G or not 5G. But independent of that, we need to provide that framework. So we have set up a CCM platform. We work together with our colleagues from different houses, whether it's GROW, whether it's RTD and the research, which is still really needed, whether it's also Connect on 5G. And for instance, the Commission has proposed in the CEF a 5G rollout, 3 billion for our colleagues from DG Connect, to make sure that these corridors happen. So it's not only on, for instance, charging points, it's also making sure that we have 5G corridors that can allow for that kind of automated transport. And automated transport is not, let's say, a purpose in itself. It has this wider purpose that you were also mentioning about a service that we will provide to citizens. This is about road safety. And if we want to make the next step in road safety and really step up on our 25,000 killed every year, I mean, how can we possibly accept that? We cannot. We cannot. So automation is for me not about whether it is 5G or G5 or all these kind of things. It's about providing a stable long-term framework for citizens. And the solutions, and it's very close to the previous debate, it's not coming out of a fight. The solutions come out of cooperation and unity. Whether it is on charging, and we need to do that for all transport modes, because road alone will not make it happen. And it comes also out of this unity on automation. And so there will be a very clear continuation. I think the meeting is already next week, Claire. I'm looking at my head of unit and the wisdom on this area. But we are not going to stop. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. I don't think he's going to talk so much about 5G, and we're not going to make that the focus anyway today, because we could talk about that till the cows come home. He might touch upon it. It's not what we chatted about when we chatted on the phone, and you said something very interesting, which I hope you will talk about where we sort of get started. But let me come back to you with this question about where you see the main challenge.
Yes, I think this may be a little bit odd to say in an auto industry event, but I think we might benefit from being less vehicle-centric and think more about transport system. And all of those topics are, of course, around the system concept. But if you talk system, and we talk three sectors that need to come together, the transport sector, the energy sector, and the digital sector. And if you think of it, all three have challenges on building infrastructure, renewing infrastructure. Not only charging point, but securing capacity in it as well. It's not only about 5G base stations in the new higher spectrum range, but it is also to get the space for it and the capacity in the network for all different usage. So the infrastructure is one challenge. It's also devices, if you call them smartphones or vehicles or meters or charging points. There are assets that benefit from being connected and benefiting from sharing data from them. And then you have the services on top. So there you have three components that build a system, but we are often missing the fourth one, which I think is perhaps the most crucial going into automation, and that's the operational centers. I think that no fleet manager would be happy without some sort of a fleet management system. I think that everybody talks about some sort of a control tower going into autonomous drive. But there will be different control towers if you are a fleet operator, or if you're a vehicle provider, or if you are a supply chain operator, or if you're a city infrastructure manager. So three sectors breaking the borders. I would have loved to see someone from the digital infrastructure signing this initiative as well. So I think that we should get those three sectors together, but not just on highest level, but really breaking it down on which are the common infrastructure questions. We have a new G basically rolling out every 10 years. You have a smart grid that is going to be upgraded both capacity-wise and intelligence-wise. You have the road infrastructure and the rail infrastructure that needs to be upgraded constantly. If we can do that in a more coordinated way, I think it would be easier to have like an infrastructure conference or a end user service conference or an operational center conference on how these three sectors come together.
And do you see... Oh, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, and then I think a second point to that. So I mean, first, breaking down the barriers, less silos, but also at the same time, not eat the elephant at once. But let's define sub-areas or domains of the whole complex transport system. It is a difference to discuss charging points for private vehicles or e-scooters compared to doing truck or distribution truck shared charging, high-capacity charging points in an urban area, or how to combine the understanding of driving hours on long-haul traffic, where you need to have charging points at where they are taking their break due to driving hour limitation. And is there then capacity effect-wise in the grid when all these trucks are going to load and charge at the same time? So it's really a matter of, I think, discussing those three areas applied on, is it wide range or long haul transport on trucks? Is it a people mobility, public transport centric domain? Is it a private car, more advanced, innovative mobility as a service? And I think innovation is not always finding new technology. Innovation is very often combining different sectors in new ways.
No, absolutely.
And I think we can do that in a more active way.
Thank you very much. And there are so many things there. I'm not going to stop now because I want to just hear from you too. But I think, you know, this issue about these three systems, they all have challenges and it's absolutely critical. And also, as you say, I loved it. You said, don't eat the elephant all at once, which I would say, eat the elephant in small bites. But I love the idea of don't eat the elephant all at once. But absolutely, and particularly if we are looking at maintaining credibility and adoption and an understanding among society at large, I think what we talked about, you've got to start telling these stories about where things are changing in very specific areas. It's a little bit like the case studies that you yourself talked about at the outset. So take it step by step. What are your thoughts on all of this, the lady who maps?
I actually have to thank the representative from Finland because she said everything I wanted to say in her speech, which is good that everyone has a bit of a context and basis. Took a bit of the kind of surprise out of it. But although this point really isn't a surprise, I think for me the main risk and challenge that we see going forward for connected and automated mobility is the risk that at the UNECE level, the regulation for autonomous driving is going to take too slow to be ready in time. I think if you look at vehicle regulation in general, it's always been slow at the UNECE. That's nothing new. And there's nothing to suggest that this is going to be done even faster for autonomous driving. If anything, there's a lot of evidence to suggest it might be even slower. And for me, there are three reasons why I think that's going to be even slower. The first reason is that autonomous driving is complex. You have lots of different factors in play. You have privacy, you have cybersecurity, you have the technical systems. And when you draft regulation, there's always a mismatch between those which develop and produce the products and services and those that regulate on them. But because autonomous driving is so complex, that gap is even wider, you know? So we as industry have much more responsibility to actually educate the policymakers exactly how our products work and exactly what they're used for. You know, it would be a bit weird if someone at the UNECE knew more about a HD map than I did. That would be a bit weird. So that is wider. That's going to definitely slow things down. A second point, and also linked to the panel before, like in climate change, where you have 2030, 2050 big target dates, we don't have a single target date for autonomous driving. It doesn't exist. And if you ask a company, when do you think autonomous driving level 4 or 5 is going to come, it's a guess, it's an estimate, or you buy reports from McKinsey and they tell you a date to go for. But it's different across the board. And if you guess right, perfect. You have your product, your service ready for when the market is ready and when the legislation is ready. But if you guess wrong, you're either too early and you have something which you can't use with and you could have used that time for something better, or you're too late and then you're going to hurt from a competitive advantage. So if we don't have this binding target vision, we don't have momentum. And if we don't have momentum, I don't think that we're going to move forward as fast as we need to. And the third and the last point, which is sensitive and it's controversial, but we need to talk about it, is the fact that there is a fear at the moment amongst regulators and at the UNECE that we are thinking about deploying a system that may cause additional accidents and fatalities. At the beginning, it may happen. And because of that fear, there's this overwhelming emphasis on the need to have perfection. We have to think every single possible scenario where something could go wrong and have 5 different backup solutions, and to have perfection to avoid that from happening. But if you strive for perfection, or you promise perfection, you're promising something you can't deliver, as we're seeing in the UK right now. So it's very delicate, it's very sensitive. It's not something which is only for TomTom to answer, it's for the whole industry to answer. But if we don't get to that real sensitive issue, I fear that's going to hold us back as a sector.
Can I just come, before I turn to you, Joost, can I just come back to you about this issue, if I may, on this, we don't have these big targets, and we haven't got this, it's not pulling us together. So it's causing difficulties, and our strategy for investment, and where do we invest our time and our money, and then, we haven't got it right. What would you say? I mean, where can the EU be, where do you sit in this? What could you be doing that could help this? Where do you see your responsibility here? Would you agree with this, that, come on, we need something, we shouldn't be going for perfection, and we need some milestones? And please hold your mic right up.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
I will. I recognize the point that you're making. I mean, from dealing with UNECE Working Parties 1 and 29, I mean, it can be awfully long. And the meetings in itself as well. But nevertheless, I mean, we need to find the balance between, let's say, making progress where we can on the short range. I mean, we have been making good progress with our colleagues on DG GROW who are responsible for type approval, for instance, with the other systems. And I think that has been, and it's quite, let's say, important for road safety, and it's a good step that we have been making. And we are really grateful for that in a road safety perspective. So if we are working now, for instance, on CITS, and the framework that we are trying to do together with all these member states and the different stakeholders involved, I think we are ready to take that next step. We are going to continue to invest money from the Connecting Europe facility into that domain. We don't know, of course, the figures yet. As Arthur said, there is no MFF. This is the big battle that will come. But there is no doubt about us that we want to go down that road. So in fact, also with our colleagues from R&I, there needs to be a lot of research still on automation and to get there. But if you don't know where you want to get at in the end, you go into the blind. So we have this framework with member states and with all the stakeholders to define. And there is also a lot of others that, together with Connect, we are doing, for instance, with the Amsterdam Declaration and all the follow-up. We think that we are confining this bit by bit. And you saw Mrs. von der Leyen's political guidelines. The third one is the digital age, digital transformation, in fact, for Europe. So the Commission has been making in its proposals a very clear plea already. I mean, there is a budget for a digital fund. There is a budget in the Connecting Europe facility of 3 billion. We will also use money out of the transport side to make this happening. So I would say there is no doubt about the priority setting. No, certainly not. Okay. This. I mean, the point that you're making, Stéphanie, is the let's say the cumbersome process with Geneva. But I think we have found ways also with the colleagues in GROW to overcome or to speed up that process. I don't know whether you share that, but I think we should do that. We cannot wait.
Let me come to you. So what have you heard? Is there something you're saying, hang on a second, we haven't even talked about this challenge? I mean, anything that you might want to synthesize there in what you heard, and anything you're saying, no, Kat, really, this needs to be put on the table?
Well, good afternoon. The beauty of being the last, not the beautiest, but is the words of wisdom have been said, most of them. I will add some words. Let's see if it's wisdom. I think we need a stable corridor. We don't have that. We don't have a stable corridor to invest in what? In moving people, passenger cars, moving goods, which is freight, and moving data, digital connectivity. What we lack a bit today is what has been mentioned. I can tell you the spaghetti of frameworks in which we have to live. We are coming from a traditional automotive sector, which is producing goods, physical goods, going into more robotization in the future. It's not about having the nicest products, it's about having the customer, the trust and the value of the customer. We use connectivity today as a transport layer, as a connected transport. Tomorrow, connectivity will actually be embedded in the car and in the truck and in the van, to enable security systems, to enable safety systems, high levels of ADAS. So it's not just my colleagues of IATA and others are not just parallel to us, they are part of our ecosystem and we are part of them. We have all kinds of spaghettis and regulatory frameworks. I'm sure that Herald and Claire and others will comply, but if I will confirm. We have a new electronic communications code regulating telecom operators, fixed and mobile operators, over-the-top layers, but also regulating connected cars. Because a connected car is an Internet of Vehicles. It's a connected device talking to another device. Can be CITS, can be all kinds of other information. That kind of information is seen as an electronic communication service, can you imagine? So we are now being seen and considered by BEREC as an electronic communication service provider, which puts us into a regulatory framework of the telecommunications sector. Probably not meant for in the past, but that's one. Second, e-privacy. A new regulation coming up, not yet there, has been a lot of presidencies already, which tackles the communication between a smartphone and the user. Fine with that. It's not only the telecom operators being dealt, but also the smartphones and other appareils, I would say, terminal equipments. A car and a truck with a SIM card and an embedded CITS station, for example, is considered as a terminal equipment. We're not a smartphone, but we will be dealt with like if we were transmitting data from one to another. Thirdly, cybersecurity. We have the UNECE. For once, they have been advocating and they have been really vocal in cybersecurity. They have a draft regulation in finalization mode actually now. They are ahead of Europe in this one. Congratulations. And it's being led by OEMs, by suppliers, and by the whole ecosystem. What we say to Connect, Move, Grow, and RTD, 4 of them, is first listen to what in the EU and EC is happening and approximate the good things in European law, in this case, the Delegated Act and the GSR. Do not come up with new things like voluntary regimes, mandatory regimes maybe, because this complicates. All this to say, when I see all my OEMs, and we have a digital component within ACEA next to automated, we have to demystify what's happening on the digital component, artificial intelligence, deep learning, all these new data, B2G data sharing. And then you have to figure out how is this made applicable for a traditional sector which comes into a new mode, into a new ecosystem. So there is a bit of demystification also on the side of the Commission, Parliament and Council. And there is a new ecosystem of it takes more than 2 to tango. We build cars, trucks, vans, buses. The road operators having the best roads, tolled and non-tolled roads. The telecoms guys and the suppliers doing the best to have the 5G tomorrow, if not yesterday. And the short-range device operators as well, not to forget them. Okay, but we all need to work together. When I want to talk to a road operator, he wants the same language. We need to have interoperability, as we say, because it's not about a device next to another device. No, it's a device with another device to learn from each other and to actually to decline all these fatalities, which Herald was and Ms. Bulch is hinting at. So we need a stable corridor. So we welcome the CCAM platform next Monday, the second meeting, and that's why we want this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm only stopping you because you could just take the stage forever and I would have no problem with that because I want to see if there are questions and then you may be able to lend your brains again to the answers. But very interesting how you describe that and I'm sure you are all, very cognizant of that. But as you see, the car is seen as a kind of smartphone. It's transmitting data. It's seen as an electronic, what did you say? Sorry? Communication services provider. So this is huge sea change and there's a lot to get to grips with. So let me throw it open to the floor because we have about 20 minutes. And who would like to come back on something that we've heard here, something on the issue that these 3 systems need to be in tandem, they can't be in silos, the digital and the energy and the transport. How do we move forward? We break it down into sub-areas. What about the funding? Nobody? Are you all absolutely give me some alcohol? Or you're... No? Nobody? Nobody wants to break the ice? No? Can we just carry on chatting for a little bit? Yes, fine. Okay, so let's just go back to this. Let's come back and draw things back, because it's been said a few times this afternoon, to the consumer. And perhaps I'll come back to you, Christel, particularly on the consumer mobility habits. Is there anything that you see? We talked about some of them when we did the little voting earlier. You may not have been here yet. Have you used ride sharing? Have you used scooters? How do you guys sort of take into account the changing consumer habits? We heard in the previous panel, well, actually, people sometimes are considered they don't know what we want, so we'll just give it to them. But how do you manage that relationship, and how is it affecting things in this transition for you?
Yeah. First, I would like to add a little bit on the autonomous topic there. There was maybe an interesting thing because it indeed links, and we have touched on the real regulatory legal constraints we still have. Also, we have the whole society, and the nice question you asked there about who is afraid, or the question I don't remember exactly, who's afraid of the autonomous driving, or who will go into it fully without a driver. We see that there is still a lot of social acceptance that we need to work on, but we may not neglect still the technical challenges which are there. So everything that we have about the whole streets that need to be mapped, so the TomToms of this world that really until the centimeter precise need to map things. Also the systems that need to still learn to work with the whole special circumstances, snow and all these things where the sensors get mixed up. The whole unexpected events that can happen on the street, a child jumping on the street coming from two cars. The calculation power of the systems is enormous that we need to have there. And then also touched on by the last sir, is really the synchronization with the technical infrastructure. There's a really big challenges where we still are at the place that we need to progress on things to really come to an acceptable, fully autonomous, and therefore it's automated is a good word there, I think. But coming back then to your final question, so we really want to go there into mobility services. So we try to provide there all kinds of applications in car, on the mobile phones. And for those, we work really close together with startup companies where we really get specific features towards our customers. And this is something that then will empower the whole ecosystem of partners with whom we work with, where we ourselves drive things, but also where we are very open to work together with the ecosystem partners. And with our car business, we try to do this, but also with the trucks, and you touched already on it. It's really there also where there is tremendous things possible with fleet, with the drivers themselves who are maybe considered as being users of a smartphone, being their truck, but it's really there where we can provide services to the end user.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for giving some concrete examples there. And I just want to come back, because I'm skipping again to, because you were talking about working with startups. I'm just going to come to you, if I may, Olle, just to pick up on this issue of, because, you know, there's a lot to think about for the automotive industry. There's a lot to think about here, and these critical partnerships. I mean, how do you see that shaping up? I was saying at the outset we could explore, you know, is there something to learn from telecoms in terms of the transition? But where do you think there could be the most shared knowledge? Where are there less pain points?
Well, I think that all three sectors have their sector-specific pain points. There are plenty of conferences talking about smart grid development and plenty of conferences talking about how to scale in 5G and how to leverage existing networks on 4G. But there are very little open discussions, I think, where we really share the sector-specific issues that could be resolved in more creative dialogues and finding joint solutions. But again, then I think it's a totally different discussions to have a consumer-centric mass discussion to how do we secure that we get the smartest and most capacity-secure infrastructure in Europe. And just as an example, I think there was, in Germany alone, the different players who would like to provide 5G services had to spend close to 6 billion euros just to get the right to spectrum. And that's even before building infrastructure. In other parts of the world, there isn't such an auction system. So there, the operators can invest all that money in starting to deploy the networks. I think Europe totaled something around 50 billion euros, which is just paid for right to air, so to say. And I think that the business models in distribution system operators in the electrical grid and the city or urban road infrastructure authorities and the mobile operators might have joint common challenges. In Japan, they recently announced from the Transport Authority that they will allow all traffic light poles to be sites for 5G base stations. 5G is now one part of 5G. Is going to be run on higher frequency bands. Higher frequency bands reach shorter, so you need to have more dense base stations. One of the reasons that we have low or in some areas, bad performance of the network or bad customer experience of the network is that they are too difficult to get new sites for mobile operators. So a typical, very simple example of how transport infrastructure operators together with digital infrastructure operators can find new solutions to secure a common quality, improved quality of service. So again, I think that's one of the points, and also finding synergies in regulation, synergies in business models, and finding new innovative value chains that goes cross. But again, different on the device side, on the consumer service side, on the infrastructure side, but also on the operational center. We are now providing network slices in 4G and 5G. Network slices mean a more quality of service committing performance of the network, which is not today's best of effort. That will be guided by artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms in the network operation center. Now, a traffic operation center will give clearance to fleet operators to run autonomous given weather conditions, road traffic conditions, vehicle, cargo carried, and so forth. They may require network capacity instantly at areas where you will run a high degree of autonomous driving vehicles. How do you secure an operational handshake between a traffic operation center and a network operation center of a telecom operator? It doesn't start with technology, it starts with operation models. I think that we wouldn't have experienced the global user consistency within mobile telephony if it hadn't been an industry agreement on how you actually define the order to service process, the fault to resolution process, and the billing process, and then having system designed properly. I think that the transport sector could learn from that and then move then into a standardization world, more from the processes and the user services than from technology and up.
Okay, thank you. Let me just check in. I haven't seen any raised hands. I feel the energy in the room. You need to be released soon because there's been a lot since 2 o'clock. Yes? No? You sure? Hang on. Is there there is a lady with a box. There's a lady here without a box. And then I've got a question for you, if I may, please, Stéphanie, after that. Thank you. And then I've got a concluding question for you, but we'll hear this question first. Thank you.
Hello. Actually, I had a question
Do you mind standing?
For Joost. And I want to get back to the first question from Stéphanie about the vision, the long-term vision. And actually, I was a bit surprised that you give the micro to the Commission. We cannot alone set this long-term vision, isn't it? So what is the position, actually, of the automotive industry?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Excellent question. We'll come up with that vision very soon, actually. And a vision needs a holistic approach. It's not about building vehicles and roads and digital infrastructure. It's about the user. It's about the client, about the fleet owner. What are they expecting? It's not about the nicest, most autonomous driverless car in the future. It's about what will be the usage, the use case of this. Will it be a POTS on a confined area? Will it be a semi-automated thing in shuttle in Brussels? Or will it be a fully integrated autonomous, for example, in ports? We have already even electrified trucks doing that. So it's about use case. ACEA is now has finalized a document that we're going to publish soon, which sets out our vision on automation mostly. Yeah, because connected is a bit derailing. It's a bit a blurred discussion. What is connected? But automated is very clear. It's a car today, a truck, a van, a bus, which will go in an autonomous way in the future, without the driver even, if your regulations allow. So indeed, the vision is not we need 2000 whatever as a mandatory date. It's industry that will set that date. And as you know, we have roadmaps of AirTrack, we have roadmaps of all kinds of organizations. We will have our own one. But we're definitely convinced that we need to set target dates for us. That's what we're going to do and publish very soon. But secondly, it takes 5 to tango, not 2. It's like the review of the DAFI or the Directive on Alternative Infrastructure. It's not only member states, it's road operators and also it's road regulators. Because the road operators is one, they are maintaining the road with public money or tolled money. But it's who is regulating and who will be the gendarme of what kind of vehicle can go on which kind of roads with what kind of people and goods at what time of the day. When I hear road operators, they want to embark into a new regulatory umbrella organization. They want even to have data for emissions and for remote sensing of these kind of things. So we need to think about this. And maybe, for Ms. von der Leyen and the new Commissioner for MOVE as well, do a kind of refit of the current legislative framework. A call for, are we really on the right track? I think we are in most areas. But all these regulations are being done in a vertical way. Automotive will grow. MOVE, very rightly, is ITS and integrated transport systems. Connect is connectivity, but much more. It's about the new telecom school, the artificial intelligence, B2B data sharing, B2G data sharing, setting up new data pools, from what I know. So how does this match all this with the reality of manufacturers? And how is there a mismatch or not? And maybe we should have an overriding, I don't call it overriding legislation, that's impossible, but at least a call for action on, are we still on the right track with all these micro-vertical regulations? And should they not have an enabling approach instead of a penalizing or a controlling approach? Yeah. Sorry for the word penalizing, but at least controlling. It should be enabling investments. Otherwise, EU will not have an automotive industry that is any more competitive. We are the most competitive ones. We invest 54 billion euros in R&D. Never seen before. So we should keep that track going and not give it to other continents. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a last question because I'm giving you so much airtime, Stéphanie, and I don't know perhaps if this is one that you can answer, but I'm just picking up on what Joost was talking about because you were sort of saying things are moving very slowly in UNECE, and he was saying, well, actually, there's some things that I can see there. Well, there's the issue of cybersecurity, saying that was very, very strong. We've also got this whole issue that this is still ongoing around e-privacy, and if we are looking at the digital transformation, the digital, which is what this panel is about. I just want to come back to the consumer and know, that's the thing that we are all, the average Joe like me. It's the thing that we're all what does it mean? What are they going to know about me? What sort of information are they gathering? What am I giving away? What am I getting? So what is that sort of understanding? Data is such a huge word. There seems to be such confusion and fear. What can you add anything in terms of what the average consumer, if we are going to adopt this, what their standpoint is?
I would turn the question slightly differently. I think it's how is the media going to spin this, and how will the media then influence the opinion of the consumer? If you look at what happened with all the Tesla accidents in the US, I mean, the US number of fatalities is much, much higher than what we have in Europe. They don't hardly report on those, but when there were those 2 Tesla accidents, they homed in completely. And I think we can expect the same media response in Europe. I mean, the media aren't going to... What's more interesting for them, to write a story about how dangerous and scary autonomous driving cars are, or how good they are for society? They're going to go for the scary story. So how can we control that narrative? And that's where you need not just, targets set by just the industry. You need a target which is agreed by everyone, and how we all agree on that storyline. Because the media will home in, and they will control it, and then they will control that public opinion, which may go, ooh, actually, I might feel safer just doing it myself.
And you come back. So there's a lot of areas. I mean, I think, but I'm sure you know this from all of these events that you attend, is that the biggest issue of everything is the collaboration. These traditional silos and this kind of sort of unique setup where you've got 4 DGs and you've got 3 of these specific these systems that need to work together and not in silos, and not least you need to come together to tell the right stories, because it's such a huge change that it's not gonna, that momentum will grind to a halt if you don't share those kinds of stories. Can I ask a last question before we close? If you, again, and please, just a couple of sentences, not something really long, again, because it closes it nicely after the first panel. It's what should be the priority? We're coming into a new commission. What should be the priority? If you could wave a wand.
Yeah.
What would you ask for?
So a lot of regulation is there for the classical world, let's call it like that. So what we see now, also when we look into our local developments in the different markets in Europe, there's a lot to do about cybersecurity, data protection, e-privacy. I grouped a little bit also the telecom law, the topics mentioned, platform regulations, artificial intelligence. All these different things are also connected in the digital, connected and automated world. And we welcome very much the CCAM initiatives. And what we really would like is an overarching approach also, that it's really coordinated even more. Next to that, when we talk about regulatory work, really make it dynamic, make it technology independent, and that it will not stifle the innovation that we all are eager to provide.
Okay, thank you. A last here, yeah, for you, sir. Yeah, why not? You can say no. You can say a last word. You're not being precluded. Go ahead, sir. Absolutely.
Well, to make a wish for myself.
Yes, exactly. It was a bit odd. I could have rephrased it for you.
But well, I think Arthur also made the point. What really concerns me most is to have a strong willingness from member states to have a strong Europe still. I mean, the MFF negotiations really worry me quite a bit. And if we are at a discussion whether we can spend 1% of GDP or not, I find this worrisome. I mean, the world is scattered more and more, and we see a volatility which is so high that things which a few years ago were no problem at all, like this Iranian oil tanker, for instance, what would be our reply? It becomes a problem. And I think, I mean, to come back also to what you were saying, Joost, we need stability. We still need to have the vision where we want to go. And we have that. I think all the people here in the room have. If we don't have, I mean, that's my strongest wish, if we don't have this strong MFF for the next period, it will block us quite a lot. Because it's not only about legislation. I don't want to go the route so much of legislation. It's also about this enabling framework and making things happening. Because I don't think that we'll go to automation in one go. It will be a gradual approach, and with ACEA, we will really also like to continue that working together, because citizens, it's a little bit like with the alternative fuels, citizens will accept ADAS. Once you have it in your car, and you're driving from I don't know, from Paris to Brussels, and you have all these systems with you, and you are more safe. So the next phase of automation, like we wanted to do it, about, for instance, this close collision warning in traffic jams, would not have bothered the citizen at all. The spin could have been completely positive. So yeah, I hope that we can do that kind of thing still. So if I have a wish to, let's say, those who are in command of what the Commission is doing, the Member States and the Parliament, please give us the tools that we can work with.
Thank you. A nice short one, because I'd like to invite Eric to do some summary. So a nice short one.
A nice short one.
Yes,
follow
please.
the Finnish example. Define KPIs, use KPIs for policy making, for public funding projects, and for public purchasing into the transport system. And also define reference models for operation cross sectors.
Yeah. Okay.
Make it a priority, set a target, and build momentum.
And for me, create a stable corridor for investment appetite. We have eCall today in the car. If 3G stops for whatever reason, it goes to 4G and 5G, there is no forward compatibility thing. eCall will not work anymore, and the PSAPs will not work anymore. We'll have more fatalities. So foreseeability, cooperation with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to close things there. I thank you very, very much for letting me whip you along at speed at a very difficult time of the day.